excavate the entire slab, dig down, 2 feet, and then put in your vapor. You obviously have to leave the walls in place. So you're going to have these little islands of concrete left.
People do that. I've seen photos of that being done. Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by GBA Editor Kiley Jacques.
Hello.
Fine Homebuilding Deputy Editor Matt Milham.
How's it going?
And producer of all things, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
You always get the best introduction.
He's the most important part of the show, honestly. None of this would happen without him, right?
True.
Right.
So how you guys been? It's good to see you. We had a weird start this morning. We tried to record earlier, and one of the helpful algorithms from Microsoft prevented us from recording. So that's been worked out. It's good to see you all. Thank you for being here. How's your day been, Kiley?
Good. I didn't realize that was the case. I was wondering why.
It was a scene.
Yeah. He was trying to say that the website that we use to record this is malicious.
Oh boy. Was
and
Brian
then
with you?
asked me if I wanted to translate it to Polish.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that happen.
Yeah.
So bizarre. How's your day been, Matt?
All right. It's getting warm over here, though.
Yeah? You got your air conditioner in?
We do, but we have run it on like most of the hot days, but it's only started to get hot here like in the last hour or so, and I didn't think it was worth it.
Well, if we see sweat dripping off your forehead, we'll know what happened.
Yeah. Probably didn't help that I opened a window about an hour ago too. So,
Kiley, did you get your weed whacker that you were so excited to tell me about last weekend?
Yeah, it's all set. It's charging as we speak. I'm ready to go.
Have you used it yet?
No, I had to charge it, and it's a big endeavor I'm about to undertake, so I need to be, caffeined and ready to go. So it's going to take a while.
What is this thing? Like
it's
battery
my
operated?
bank. Oh yeah. It's a 18 volt. It's the cousin weed whacker to my Ryobi electric mower. I'm very happy with that. So I got the weed whacker. I finally broke down. I heard Patrick's voice in my head. Oh, buy a new tool. Who cares?
Well, I hope all of our listeners take that to heart, right? So I've got to keep this economy going.
That's right.
So I can't wait to hear how that works. Have you had to wind up the spool of cutting material?
It's all set to go. Nope, I got it all ready. It came ready. I'll have to do that at some point, obviously. But anyway, yeah, it's fun.
No,
it's
just
fun
throw
to
it
get
away
a new thing.
because it's easier. Just buy a new one. It's
Just
easier
replace
than
it. Yeah, probably. Yeah. So those things are always fun to do. It's gratifying. I got to watch out for snakes.
And poison ivy.
And when you live down by the river, there's a lot of water snakes. So I'm gonna put on my rubber gear.
You're going to need your knee-high rubber boots, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
They're steel-toed,
Matt, what have you been doing?
So.
What have I been doing? Not a whole heck of a lot, I can tell you that. I mean, working on the garden a little bit. We had deer coming in and eating almost everything, like at least trying everything.
They're
like, how is this? Oh, this tastes like crap. And they were just pulling stuff out of the ground and just making a mess. So a lot of it's just been...
I thought you had cordoned it off in some way, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's like the fence is probably 50 inches tall, something like that. Not very tall, a little over 4 feet. So, but I think they were jumping over the gate, which is even shorter. So I have a big like sieve, I guess, for grading soil, and I just leaned that up against the gate, and so far that seems to have kept them out. Yeah, like a big sifter. So yeah, that's on the one end anyway. The other side, there's a swale and sort of a little bridge over the swale, and I think the deer don't like walking on the bridge. So that seems to be keeping them away on that side. I don't know. We'll see. It's been 3 or 4 days since they've been in there, so.
So I've heard, and this may be complete BS, but once they get in there, it's very hard to keep them out, that they will go to great lengths to push down the fence.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. I mean, when I worked on an organic farm, in college during summers, and there were deer that would jump over the fence that was probably more than 10 feet tall. Like the top wires were like more than 10 feet. And they would jump over the lower fence, which was probably like 6 or 7 feet, thinking, I don't know if they just didn't see the wires, and they would hit those wires and it would just be this like crazy twing sound when the wires snapped as a deer just sailed through it.
Oh, boy. All your work and all the money that you put into the soil prep, and so frustrating.
Yeah.
They've been eating our perennials. That's our problem with them, because the garden has a 7 high foot fence, and I splurged on some pretty good deer fencing, and it's held up really well. It's almost 10 years old now.
What's it made out of?
It's polypropylene. It's the black kind of hexagon shaped, fencing stuff.
Yep.
It looks like snow fence or whatever.
I was going to say, it's like snow fencing. Mm-hmm.
What have you been doing, Jeff?
Not a whole lot. I was actually away over the weekend, so visiting family, which was kind of nice.
That's a new thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
You've been the busiest among us, I think.
Yeah, I was started out like I was going to replace the pegboard around my steps in the barn, and then I decided to like tear everything out and redo the steps to make them more. I described it as lightning, so they weren't so imposing on the space. They take up less space, so that's very much a work in progress. I haven't started reconstructing the steps, but I have mocked them up to I think I know what I'm going to do.
You're just reusing the same stringers, or are you going to cut new ones, or what?
I'm going to cut new ones, I think. Yeah, I mean, I might reuse sections of the stringers, but the configuration is going to change enough that they will have to be altered. They won't be the same. Yeah. I'm going to do winders at the top, I think. So, yeah, I haven't made a staircase with winders in about 10 years, so I'm a little rusty. I'm going to have to call Andy Engel for help.
Get a steel spiral staircase.
So I kind of was entertaining that idea, Matt, but it's like they're very expensive for starters. The one I need to go 9 feet is like for anything of any quality is like $3,500, and that's a lot of money for me when you consider a wood stair tread pre-made, pre-finished costs $30 from the home center, right? Mm-hmm. And I actually thought about buying dimensional Doug fir lumber of good quality and making housed stringers with treads made from 2x stock. And I'd have to get your help on. I know you still have to put a riser in there to pass the sphere test, but I think there'd be a way you can make that pretty open and look cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could do super thick treads.
Those are awesome. I love
do like
that.
double or triple
layer
treads.
Yeah. What is the allowable sphere for that area?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember. It's either 3 or 4 inches.
Okay, so it's the smaller sphere, not the 6-inch one that's between the tread and the bottom of a sloping baluster.
I believe so.
Rail, yeah.
Yeah. It would take 1 second to look it up, but I'm not going to take the time.
Well, and it's not that important because, I'm not nearly that far along anyway, so.
Is this among the more challenging things you do when it comes to carpentry, Patrick? Building stairs? They seem complicated to me.
Well, so my stair building, Kiley, it's real stair builders are not described as my stair building as stair building. I know how to make service stairs, like how to fit up a balustrade on a nice staircase. Like no one should ever trust me to do that, and I don't even think I would attempt it on myself without some help from Andy. Habitat houses don't have that kind of balustrade, and if they do, it was existent in the house before we started rehabbing it. So I have no training in that kind of work, but I know how to do the math for service stairs and do landings and winders, and I enjoy it. It's challenging.
Yeah, it seems like it would be. All right. Well, looks great. Good for you.
Thanks. It's I needed a project. I was getting kind of sloven.
Did you have to wait for Liam to be done with school for that to happen?
Yes.
That was where he was taking all of his classes, right? And now he can't get up there.
Oh, right.
We could put up an extension ladder, but nobody has expressed that, big enough interest to want to go up there. So we haven't yet. But, I only think it'll take a day to make, a set of rough stairs so that we can use the space again and then maybe fine tune it or, change it as needed.
Yeah.
So as always, we heard from some listeners who made some suggestions and had some feedback. This comes from Alex. I was listening to a recent podcast, I think it was 363, where the residential energy book by Krieger was mentioned. An alternative to that book, if people were looking for something a little more user-friendly than a college-style textbook, would be the BPI Building Science Principles Guide that is a resource for their certification test. It costs about a third of the price and condenses things a lot compared to the full-on college textbook experience. Just thought I'd pass that along since as a homeowner interested in building science, that's what I use to begin that long and endless hole of building science. So Kiley, is this the book you use for your...
That's right. I did buy this. I did. Yes, I do remember that. I sort of stopped about 3/4 of the way through, and I'd forgotten that I made that purchase. But I looked this back up, and yes, he's absolutely right. It's very user friendly. It's chock full of information.
Have you seen this book,
great
Matt?
suggestion.
No, I have not.
I think it would be rudimentary for you, Matt. I mean, and you too, Patrick. But I think it's exactly what he's describing for the person who wants to get a general
Their feet
understanding
wet,
of some basic concepts. I think it's excellent. Emily speaks very highly of this. This is anyway. I don't want to take up much more time on it.
Emily Mottram?
Right, the architect. She did this training, and she always says good things about it.
Cool.
So and others too, but it seems like it comes up regularly with her.
Well, thanks for that, Alex. This comes from Doug. Hi, all. With regard to the person in number 360 who wants an outdoor skateboard ramp, my first thought was, aren't there easier ways to achieve a serious injury? As far as covering it with Masonite, I think it would take a huge amount of sealer. For over 30 years, it has been common to cover stage floors with Masonite. It provides a pretty good surface for rolling scenery, and it can be painted for whatever the set requires. However, in a non-climate controlled building, it has one serious flaw. In humid weather, it can swell and buckle. For outdoor use, I would think the backside would need as many coats of sealer as the top. It might not hurt to also add a layer of 30-pound felt before laying the Masonite. Try to keep the cost down since the extra money will be needed for ER visits.
I love this guy. I think this is the same Doug that recommended bowling alley for my tap floor. He's got that theater background.
Have you ever had a skate ramp, Matt?
No, I have not.
BMX?
No, I did have a BMX bike, and I do still have a pair of rollerblades around somewhere, but no, I was never coordinated enough to do skateboarding.
That's funny. Masonite.
Next to over trucking, we've heard more about skateboard ramps than perhaps any other subject we have talked about on the show. It's awesome. So I guess at one point we asked about zone dampers, and Doug Horgan responded, on zone dampers, I've had to help fix a dozen of them from probably 6 brands and several different control and design types. I learned pretty on that the typical HVAC tech who maybe has an hour or two to make an average repair before their boss wants them on to the next job doesn't have the time or interest to sort through the manual and check the operation of every zone in a complex house. So I read up on them and learned how to do some of the diagnostics to help the process along. As you probably know, I've used data logging to evaluate these systems too. So I think that's good advice. If you're going to be putting these things in your houses, either your own or someone else's, I would want to know how they work, because when they don't, the HVAC tech doesn't know either.
Yeah.
What
Doug
is it with HVAC techs?
I feel like we've had this conversation before. Well,
but
I mean, the point. There's probably a lot of pressure on them to just keep moving. Just do the basics and move on. What specifically is your question?
I mean, but if you're on a service call, isn't the thing to fix the thing that's broken? Isn't that what you're supposed to be doing?
You would hope.
Yeah, you would hope so. I mean, the thing is, like, if you don't know enough about these systems, why are you installing to begin with? Forced air systems just seem like they don't belong in houses if people aren't going to, if even the people who are supposed to know about them can't figure them out.
Right. Right.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, people have forced air systems because they want air conditioning. But I mean, yeah, if you're going to install this stuff, you should know how to fix it, I would say. It used to be really good technical support from the equipment manufacturers. I remember my uncle, who was an HVAC contractor, would call, from the client's house and be like, I have this system and it's, showing this error code or it's behaving this way. And there would be someone on the other end of the phone who would more often than not be able to tell you at least a couple things to look for. And oftentimes it was a fix, and which is hugely helpful when you have, systems from other manufacturers that you're not the dealer for or whatever. You can't just tell clients who have multiple systems that you only work on one kind, right? So you can call up the 800 number, which is usually on the inside of the cabinet, and get some help with it. Maybe that's not the case anymore, or maybe the systems are so complex that the folks on the other line are overwhelmed with variables to tell you what's wrong.
They have gotten probably more complex.
I'm sure.
In the last couple of decades. I wonder how Allison Bales would answer that question in terms of why are
what's
they
wrong with the HVAC
more
industry?
versed? Yes. Mm-hmm. I'll put it to him and get back to you.
He made a good point in a piece I was reading of his today, is that he heard from an HVAC tech who was saying that the Mandel's calculations, if you really use them the way we tell you to, which is be aggressive, right? That on a couple weeks out of the year in Florida or 3 weeks out of the year in Florida, there's not enough cooling. And you get a call from a client who can't get their house below 85 degrees. And they don't call the builder about the envelope or the insulation contractor, right? They call the HVAC tech, and the HVAC tech who sizes equipment there was no guarantee that the other trades did their job or didn't leave huge holes in the envelope or left, insulation out or didn't put as much in as they were supposed to. And so he oversizes. He's like, I can't rely on these folks to have done their job. I'd love to be able to do that, but I can't. And I thought that made a really good point.
That is a good point. Yeah.
Maybe it's not all their fault.
It's not all their fault, I'm sure. And they're given, like little space to run ducts and install mechanical equipment, which has an effect on performance. And,
And sometimes they're not using the right duct for the job, right?
Yeah, and they're designed badly and have lots of curves and static pressure that, prevents even delivery. That's a whole podcast we should start in the third podcast, maybe.
HVAC systems. Right.
Speaking of comfort, this is from Zachary. Greetings, FHB podcasters. I just bought a condo which has 2 uninsulated 8-foot garage doors. I like to work in my garage, and I live in Virginia, so keeping it cool in the summer is more important to me than keeping it warm in the winter. I had purchased Owens Corning garage door insulation kits. They're vinyl-faced fiberglass bats with an R value of 8. However, now I'm seeing radiant barrier kits, and it has me second-guessing my decision. Their doors are white and soak up the sun since they are south-facing. I'm wondering if I could get the best of both worlds by applying a radiant barrier next to the metal door, then the fiberglass bats. To decouple the radiant barrier from the door itself and create an air gap, I'm thinking of using some thin foam insulation strips or even just large dollops of construction adhesive. The cost of an insulated garage door is well over $1,000 each and has to meet all of our homeowners association rules for looks, etc. I can do this for under $500 for both doors, even using both types of insulation. Do I try and combine the 2 systems or just go with one? If I only go with one, which will do a better job of keeping me cool in the summer, I can't seem to find any actual data, and I'm hoping the FHB podcast can point me in the right direction. Well, what the heck do you think about this, Kiley? What kind of insulation do you have on your garage door?
It's radiant barrier season. It seems like this topic is coming up again and again and again.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I noted that he talked about, a couple of things. He calls the color white as, isn't that a reflective color? I know it's south-facing, so sure it's going to gain some heat, but it just struck me that he said it's white. I think of white as a reflective surface.
I do
color.
too, and I think it has a high or low albedo, the measurement of how reflective something is. Am I making this up?
No, you're right. It's
term.
high albedo, yeah.
High albedo, okay. And then I was I got stuck on the idea of, first of all, it seemed like, in principle, an interesting idea that using the metal door. I didn't quite understand the configuration. He was talking about putting it next to the metal door. So I was trying to picture where
So
Where
I
he's
think he
talking
would
about
leave
adding it to the framing, or
a small space between the steel panel or aluminum panel of the skin of the door and in the interior. So the radiant barrier would not be touching the back of the door, but it would be spaced
For the
off
air
a
gap.
slight amount, right?
right, for you need that air gap in there. Yeah. I don't know. What did you guys think? It's an interesting concept.
I mean,
Are you going to tear it to shreds, the idea of it?
I'm withholding comment till the end.
Okay.
radiant barriers can work, they do a little bit. It's not that they're ineffective, but they're really effective in like really hot climates. And I don't know that he's, really, it might be on the edge of like where they might start to become valuable, but I don't think it's valuable enough where he is to like really warrant, installing one in addition to the insulation. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the insulation that he has is probably going to be at least as good as what comes in those insulated garage doors, because the R values that most of these garage door manufacturers put on those doors are ridiculous, like unachievable, like beyond the physics that are even possible with the kind of insulations they're using. Like they're just lying through their teeth and selling you trash and telling you that it is, like the greatest thing that's ever been made. And I mean, they're not even evaluating them properly because they're not getting evaluated at all. Like they're just saying, oh, this is an R20 garage door with 2 inches of insulation. It's like, I would love to see this, R10 per inch EPS foam that's inside this door.
The door, right?
But,
yeah.
I mean, that's a whole other discussion, I guess. But anyway, the R8 bats are probably going to be good enough. I mean, I'd be a little worried about fire with those. Not really exactly, but I mean, like garage assemblies are, supposed to be fire rated.
Not catch fire, let's say that.
Not catch fire, yeah. So the vinyl does scare me a little bit, but not really. I mean, this is like a product that's actually made for this, I did look up the flame developed index for this, and it's not Class A rated. It's like Class B, I think. It's like a rating of 40. But it's...
Maybe you can tell the rest of us what the heck any of that means.
It's like how far the flames will propagate in a given amount of time. It's like, this test, they basically have like a tube and they like force air through it, and then they light the whatever it is on fire at one end, and it's 25 feet long, and they just see how far the flame goes in a given amount of time.
How do you get this job?
I have no idea. I'm sure it's probably like an ASTM type thing. Like somebody probably, there's a lab set up somewhere that does this.
I would just love to tell people I'm the person who sets the things on fire at the lab.
I was going to say, it sounds like a great job for an arsonist.
Yeah.
So no on the radiant barrier, huh? That's not the climate's not quite right to make it as.
Isn't the door
it might
itself
do
a radiant barrier? Isn't that like?
Isn't what a radiant barrier?
The shiny steel. Isn't that a radiant barrier itself?
I don't know basically what
Depends
you're
on
looking
the
for
coating,
is, it depends on the emissivity of the material. I don't know that I don't know what the emissivity of that is, but certainly aluminum is. So shiny aluminum is, has very low emissivity, and that makes a great radiant barrier, and that's why it's usually what's used in those radiant barrier panels or radiant barrier film, whatever it is. So,
Could he add some kind of different coating to the door to make it more of a, so the recess, I can never say this word. Emissivity. It doesn't come off my tongue. If he could improve that with some kind of surface treatment.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to get it low enough to make that much of a difference, really. But maybe, I mean, in a really, really hot climate, maybe. But, the sun's typically not beating directly on it. It's like, and this is a white door.
Right.
It's already reflecting a lot of the light away. So I don't know that it's making that much of a difference. But, I mean, also, check the insulation everywhere else. I don't know what's on either side, what's in the walls on either side of it. If it's not living space on either side, it's very possible that garage isn't insulated on those other walls. And
I didn't even think of that, Matt, right?
I would focus on those first.
Yeah.
And I mean, almost guaranteed that the slab is not insulated. So, I mean, there's a lot of pathways for heat to escape this place as it is, or for heat to get in.
Jeff, you might be the only person I know that has nice garage doors. Do you think your garage doors do an effective job of making your garage comfortable?
They help mitigate the changes in temperature. I mean, well, it's hard to, I mean, we've got attic space above the garage and then 3 exterior walls. And it never
So
gets
it's
below.
cold.
It never, I don't think I've ever had it go below 40.
So in Virginia, that might be totally fine, right? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. But he's more concerned about heat.
Heat, right.
And again, mine doesn't get overly hot unless we leave the doors open. So,
Yeah. So garage doors are notoriously energy pigs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping we'd get Matt on a rant about the ratings of these things. True to form. So the problem is the door. Air leakage is a huge problem with these things. No matter what you do to insulate, the door is steel front and back, so it is the perfect thermal bypass, right? So I think you got to weather strip it as best you can to keep the hot air out. I would rather have rigid insulation on the interior of the door, like the really good overhead garage doors I've seen have rigid insulation and another skin on the inside, and they cost, like you said, thousands of dollars, but it's clearly, you know, inches of urethane foam, and it's not going to be like R20 like they advertise, but it might be R10. And if you can reduce the like radiant energy coming off that door, it's going to make you a lot more comfortable in the garage. You know, it's unlikely to help a lot with the temperature, but it's not going to be this radiator, you know, at your back while you're trying to work in there.
Yeah.
Are you saying he should modify his existing doors or get new doors?
I'm saying I really don't want to recommend an off-label use of rigid insulation because of Matt's good point that, you know, assemblies and garages need to not catch fire. But, you know, there are foil-faced EPSs that are meant to be left exposed. It's probably a stretch to say that you're allowed to leave that exposed in the garage. So I don't know what to do. It's like I can say that rigid insulations work better than fiberglass in this kind of application.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion too, was going with Thermax, you know, the foil-faced whatever that is. It's got some
It's
kind of like
polyiso.
glass fiber. Yeah, polyiso. Yeah, and just cut that to fit. I don't know what this door looks like on the backside. Some of them are just like a single skin, and then the back just
It's
sort of
hollow,
has like
yeah.
open channels, and then you can kind of just fit this stuff, you know, cut it to fit in there. And in that case, you know, that
How would
stuff
you fasten
also,
it?
well, you could just kind of glue it in. Just
Yeah, I
glue
think
it
you'd
right to
glue
the
it in.
steel. And then
You don't.
that stuff, because of the foil facing, you know, if you want that radiant barrier,
Yeah,
like,
right. There you go.
put it
Just,
so that-
but you'd have,
Right.
if
but
there's
you'd
a
have to leave
clean,
an air
shiny side,
gap.
just face that toward the, you know, toward the
the
space.
exterior or the.
I mean, you
the
know, and then
outside,
you're,
right?
then you're golden.
No, to the inside.
To
it
the
doesn't
inside?
work that way, Kylie.
I
That's
know.
the-
I think I always get the opposite. I picture it opposite. I see.
I tried to get
see.
Peter Pfeiffer to explain that to me.
Explain it. I know. But tell me, if you were to go for that air barrier idea with that product, wouldn't he need to create an air gap for it
The
to
air
work?
gap
Not
is
necessarily.
the inside. I mean, if he's doing the foil-faced insulation, you know, as long as that shiny side is facing the inside of the garage, then that's your radiant barrier.
Your radiant barrier. Man, that's genius, Matt. All right, Zachary, there's your solution. Maybe you can get a side hustle insulating your neighbor's garage doors, because I bet they all have the same complaint.
You don't think that would interrupt the function in any way? I can't quite picture this scenario.
So what Matt and I are both assuming is that he's got the cheapest kind of garage door. And instead of like having 2 skins, it's got 1 skin and then some ribs on the other side. You know, some like C-shaped channels that are riveted or somehow affixed to the front skin. And then what we're suggesting is cutting foam to fit in those like what amount to little rectangles, kind of big
Right.
window pane kind of shapes, right?
Cut and cobble it.
That's,
Okay.
Yeah.
Cut and cobble it is exactly what we're talking about.
Okay.
What do you think, Jeff? Is this dumb?
No, I think it's a nice idea if he wants to be able to use that space when it's hot out. The thing I was wondering about was maybe comfort board or something like that. Is that
What's
way
that?
The rigid
Rockwool?
rigid Rockwell, yeah.
Oh, Oh, yeah, because that won't burn.
Right.
Oh yeah, they they have that demonstration.
Boy, I bet that
video
makes
they
your
always
garage
share.
door kind of heavy, and I bet your springs would have to be configured for that, right? Compared to foam.
Yeah.
Just get a bigger garage door opener, bigger operator.
Really test those springs, right, Matt?
Yeah.
It is exciting when they let go.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how did Matt describe it? Dramatically.
Yeah.
The cost would probably be significantly more too on that, right?
For
Than
rock wool?
than maybe say like recycled poly.
Well, they're not going to sell you that little amount of recycled insulation. When
you
you
have
buy
to buy big
recycled
volumes.
insulation, you get a truckload of it.
That's right. I
That's
think
why
you
he has
told
to
me
do all of his neighbors' garages, too.
Right. He can cut and cobble those on insulated walls, too.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a good question, and it brings to mind another interesting conversation we had on the podcast, so I hope you guys remember. This comes from Philip, who lives in Levittown, New York. Greetings and salutations. My name is Philip, and I'm reaching out in need of advice regarding my home. I live in a Levitt house on Long Island, specifically the Levitt Ranch variety. There have been some modifications to the original structure by the previous owners, including a large dormer creating a full second story, an enclosed carport, which was at some point an attached garage and was further converted to living space in the manner of 2 bedrooms. I am looking to move in the direction of high efficiency and have been casually researching upgrades I intend to employ. I'm having some difficulty resulting from the original construction. The slab on grade foundation is not insulated, nor does it have a vapor retarder or a vapor barrier. So says the internet regarding the original construction. Interestingly enough, these homes were fitted with radiant floor heat when originally built, but the copper piping corroded, leaving the system unusable. My home happens to have the hot water baseboard radiators with a traditional oil boiler. So here comes the question. I would like to convert my home to all electric, a mini splits for heating and cooling, and a heat pump water heater for hot water. The insulation in this house is pretty terrible. I would like to pull down the sheetrock and get some insulation in there. I was thinking to further walls and install some high R insulation in any way possible, bats, cellulose, whatever. The attic would most definitely need to be insulated, and I would undertake the task of trying to seal as many air leaks / eliminate as many thermal bridges as possible. The walls and attic, while daunting, are not a major concern for me. The slab, on the other hand, absolutely is. Aside from lifting the house and repouring a properly insulated and air barriered and a water, what is that?
Just as barrier, but I think it's
Water
like vapor
barrier.
barriered.
Yeah. And a vapor barrier. Do I have any options? I have looked into insulating the perimeter with rigid foam, maybe adding an insulated subfloor, reducing my ceiling height. I have 8-foot ceilings and I'm 6'5", so I'd like to retain as much ceiling height as possible. Your input is greatly appreciated. Do you guys know what I'm talking about when we talked about Levittown houses being uninsulated?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was the story of the plumber who used his fat cat to track down these leaking heating systems because the lazy
Right.
cat would move to the hottest part of the floor. It was hilarious.
And the homeowner who suggested that he mop the floor, make it wet, and then turn the heat up to expose the pipes, right? Shadows.
So there was a woman who owned this house, and she had a bunch of kids. So when she mopped the floor, she would turn on the heat to dry this so the kids wouldn't slip, and it would show where the leaks were. And it was fantastic. So anyway, that plumber who wrote that piece also pointed out that these homes would grow tulips in February because of all the heat loss through this perimeter of the slab. So this is really where you want to focus your energy upgrades, I would say. The problem is how to do that. Does anyone have any ideas?
It
Yeah.
seemed to. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I mean, I would probably sort of retrofit like a frost-protected shallow slab foundation type situation. Like
This is what I thought too.
vertical insulation around the perimeter, and then a frost wing extending at least 2 feet. You probably have to look up exactly what it's got to be in the code for your climate zone. But yeah, and then that just sort of slopes away from the house, but keeps the ground immediately adjacent to the house from freezing, and
Losing heat.
and also from losing heat. I mean, that's mostly what the vertical insulation is for, but the other stuff will also help, keep all of that heat from going up and out.
It's going to
Or out
help
and up.
because the center of the slab is uninsulated too, right? So that heat's going to want to move there, travel through the soil, and go under the the edge of the house. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You just want to give it like basically as little opportunity or the longest trip to get there, I guess.
Right. Right.
What about the issue of the vapor barrier?
I think he's just going to have to, I mean, if it hasn't been an issue yet, and I assume it's not if the walls aren't rotting, then
You know
Run a
the
dehumidifier.
geology of Long Island better than I do, Matt, but it's a big sandbar as I understand it, right?
Yeah,
so that's got to help.
Yeah, once you go down, I mean, we used to, when I worked as an environmental consultant, we used to put holes in Long Island all the time, drilling for, test wells and stuff. And usually we would hit, you'd go through like sand and gravel, and then usually not too long before you start hitting like gigantic cobbles and boulders. Because, I mean, it's all basically just the terminus of a glacier. Like that's where all the stuff from the glaciers got dumped.
That's where it ended, right? That's where the stuff was let off, right?
That was
the end
it.
of the
Yeah,
line.
at least, yeah, exactly.
Is there a lot of fill on Long Island too?
It depends on where you are. You definitely come across that, like gigantic, huge ash pits and stuff from old power plants and things like that. But no, I wouldn't say generally that it's fill. I mean, it's the stuff that's there is more or less consolidated, but the glaciers only retreated 14,000 years ago, so it's relatively new stuff.
So can I ask about something that I have
ahead.
been thinking about, and the whole idea of a flow of now. I'd forgotten that he was concerned about
Tall.
ceiling height, right? So this might not work, but the whole idea of a floating assembly, a floating floor assembly, right? So you've got your, so he'd be retrofitting the slab by adding, like 4 to 5 inches of. So there goes the head height, right? So I can't suggest that.
You might get away with an inch, which would make it more comfortable. But boy, I don't know that would solve the energy hemorrhaging that's going out through the slab.
Can I ask one more thing about the? I read that RedGuard is something that's used, for like a coating to create a vapor retarder. I think class 2 vapor retarder. Is that something that is
I
recommended?
think that might
or
be
no?
an off-label use of that product, which is really meant to be a tile waterproofing. I
Right,
don't know
but I
that they
think
ever
people
intended
use it
to
this
use it
way.
that way. Yeah,
Right.
I think I would want something that was
The reason
marked-
that
and
people were suggesting it on GBA because
it's cheap.
Coda had recommended some other products that people were having a really hard time finding, and then this seemed to be like a solution that they were coming up with, epoxy coating. But yeah, you don't want to suggest that to people if it's off-brand, right?
I mean, it might be the same thing in a different bucket. The stuff that's meant to be a vapor barrier and air retarder, but I don't know that. So, if you could get RedGuard to tell you that they make both products and that they're the same, I would go with it.
One thing I was thinking about with this house, I mean, the guy, it sounds like he's willing to do a ton of work. Like he wants to rip out all of the sheetrock essentially and
Re-insulate.
like beef up the insulation. Like if you're willing to put that much into it, I would attack it from the outside, and like then you can really get a good air barrier out there,
And you
whether
could
it's
even run that insulation down to the grade, although folks in
That
like
was
the
the
South
other
are going to
thing. You
tell
can-
me I'm insane, but
Yeah, and then you can, with those thicker walls, then, you're not going to have some weird kick out at the foundation when you insulate around that. But yeah, so you do, a really good air barrier on the outside and then insulate over that. And then you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck with continuous insulation on the outside than trying to pack these, what I'm guessing are guaranteed to be 2x4 walls with however many inches of whatever, insulation.
I can tell you they had a less than normal framing factor though, because these things were very short on sticks. They made them as absolutely cheap as possible. Like
Yeah.
if they could eliminate a stud, you do that 1,000 times, like you're talking thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah.
I
So
would say,
what I don't
Philip,
understand. It
Go
seems
ahead,
to me
Kiley.
okay. So the hydraulic the radiant heat system that they use, those copper pipes are all rotting, right? And or not the pipes themselves, the studs that they are in contact with are all rotting, right? So he's right to be concerned about moisture coming up through there, right?
I would say if it's not a problem, it's not a problem.
I see.
You know, there's tons of these houses, and if that was a concern, I think we'd have heard about it by now.
Got it.
I don't know. I mean, I think, Philip, you need to get someone out there with a blower door, and you might find there's some really easy things to fix, and, you know, you might find that insulating just the edge of your slab and the wings, as Matt suggested, which I think is a fantastic idea, you know, solves your whole hemorrhage from that slab, which is definitely going to be the biggest problem with this house. And there might be other problems that you don't know about, and your results wouldn't be what you expect because they're all the heat's going out anyway somewhere else. I don't think I would want to make ceilings any lower. What do you guys think?
About what?
I don't think I would want to insulate the floor because the ceiling is 8 feet and this person is 6'5", Philip is 6'5". That seems like he doesn't want to go any lower than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because when you go to sell the place too, people are going to be like, what the heck's going on in here?
Can't stand up in here, yeah.
Excavate the entire slab. Dig down, I don't know, 2 feet, and then put in your vapor. You obviously have to leave the walls in place. So you're going to have these little islands of concrete left.
People do that. I've seen photos of that being done. Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah. No,
I mean, these houses are small
like
to begin with, right? And they added the garage, which became living space, but the footprint is tiny.
He also makes the point that it's an inexpensive house, and he doesn't want to go beyond what makes sense.
Yeah.
I bet it's more expensive than we can imagine, though.
Oh, it's probably over $500,000 at least for what's probably
the last time I looked, they were in the 700s and 800s.
Why are they so desirable? Because of where they are.
Yeah.
And it's got history. I mean, it's it's America's first suburb. Yeah, right.
All right, this comes from our friend Dyami. Dyami must listen to this show, and you'd think he would know better than to ask us questions. But anyway, fine friends at Fine Homebuilding's Fine Podcast. I'm working on a garden shed, which I plan to side with white cedar perfection shingles. To ornament the shed, I would like to stain the respective courses of shingles in one area of the colors of the rainbow. In my head, I'm picturing colors similar to those achieved with dyes like trans tint. However, I understand that the stain or dye used must be UV stable. Do you have any suggestions for vibrantly colored exterior stains or dyes, preferably some that do not require a color-altering clear coat over them? Thanks for the help, Dyami. Who's got an idea?
My idea was Barbara needs to answer this question. You know that she knows the answer to this. So we're calling on Barbara to write in on this one. You know she knows the perfect product, or she can make it.
I think that is a fantastic suggestion, way better than anything I've come up with.
How about you two?
Mineral-based pigments.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah.
Because they don't fade in the sun.
Mm-hmm.
But how's that going to get into the wood?
So, you can buy these pigments and then you just add it to whatever your carrier or base is going to be.
Water.
Can be water. You can do lime. You can probably do some kind of, base, like latex base or something if you wanted to. You'd have to figure out exactly what you want to add it to, and then you're just going to mix it up yourself and paint it on. But I mean, this is basically what you do for
It sounds like you're telling
Dyami
to become a paint chemist to paint his shed.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way Matt would go about it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you're mixing lime washes and you tint them with mineral pigments, and then it just stays that color forever. It's cool. Nice. And then if you want it to be, more saturated, you just
Matt?
Yeah, that's what they use. I mean, that's what was it? Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer was doing.
What they do to
lime washing his fence.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Got kids to do it for him.
What's the treatment that they give barns a lot? Is it the same thing?
Well, in the old days, I think it was a mixture of blood and mud or something like that. I don't know. Blood and lime wash.
More recently, it's been iron oxide, in some kind of carrier.
Yeah, and I mean that's in the same class as mineral pigments, but Yeah. I mean, you can just add that to a lime wash. You basically just take, crushed limestone or crushed lime and, mix it in water and mix in your pigment. You got to keep mixing it because it wants to settle out almost immediately. But yeah, and then you just paint it on.
I'm gonna go, and then I'm gonna ask Jeff for your thoughts. But my suggestion was close enough to Matt's that I thought I would just go with it. So milk paint comes in amazing colors, and I don't know what
like
that
stain,
stuff is,
right?
but they say you can put it outside, and it works a lot like the way Matt describes a lime wash, whereas it's this powder, you mix it with water, it comes out of suspension almost immediately. You have to keep stirring it. I found if you use warm water, it works better than cold. I found that you have to use twice as much pigment than they say to actually make it a workable consistency. It's definitely a learning curve, but it might be worth trying, or at least talking to them to see if it's suitable for this kind of outdoor application. Jeff, what do you think?
It's got a stain effect too, right? It doesn't look like paint.
Yeah, it's
even
kind
though
of transparent.
It's kind of transparent,
it's cool.
Right. I like it too.
I got nothing.
Have you guys done mixing that you've just described? Have you done that kind of mixing and made that product?
So all my, it would be optimistic to call it casework. All the plywood boxes I make to put things in are milk painted.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I think you're the one that introduced me to milk paint. Come to think of it.
I love it. I hate working with it. It's miserable garbage, but boy, it looks fantastic when it's done. It is just a great end product, and it seems to be pretty durable. It's held up for us so far for a couple years.
And do you need to use that like right away? Does it go bad? Because it is milk. It's casein from milk.
So if you put it in the fridge, you
cool.
can keep it for a couple days easily.
Okay.
I haven't tried to keep it longer than that. I mix it up in small batches in a little Rubbermaid cup, and then when I'm done applying it with a foam brush, I stick it in the fridge and use it the next day. If I still have some after the second day, I throw it out.
Yeah. I have used lime paints. Actually, my bedroom, the one or the two walls, I guess, that I lime plastered. I also lime washed those, and
nice.
I have lime washed a whole like straw bale house. And you just do multiple coats if you want it more saturated or whatever. But it's super easy to mix up on your own.
Any downsides, Matt?
That you have to do multiple coats to get the saturation that you want. You end up going around and around and around and around.
What were you saying, Kiley?
I'm just wondering about the pigments. What is there any like compatibility issue? Like, what are the pigments? Tell me about those. I don't know about this process. The colors. How do they?
You mean like them interacting with each other? If he's going to use a bunch of different ones?
I'm just trying to think of the product that you use. Like, what do you buy? What kind of is a powder?
Yeah,
where do you get it?
Yeah. You like if you're looking for mineral pigments, then you can you really just have to Google mineral pigments for paint or whatever, or just mineral pigments. And it just comes as a really finely ground powder. Mm-hmm. And then you just add it to whatever you're going to make.
It's literally that mineral ground up and put in a bag and sent to you, right?
Cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can get all really, really nice colors. I mean, like you said, you can get rust if you wanted a rust color.
Yeah.
But I mean, also, copper, makes that nice green when that's, similarly reduced or oxidized. So,
Kiley, I think these pigments, would have the same names as your oil paint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think they're the same things. And,
Yep.
I don't know that.
It's the mineral, right?
Yeah, and I'm betting Dyami doesn't want to pay what it's going to cost for oil
Well, I was
paint,
going
right?
to say, I bet,
Right.
I bet those pigments are expensive though.
I bet they are too.
some of them probably are, yeah. And I mean,
But this is a small project.
Yeah,
so,
it's just the end of a shed,
Right. Yeah.
I
It'll
think
look
it's a
cool.
cool idea.
I do too.
Yeah.
I hope we get a photo to see if he does it.
Oh, we'll get a photo somehow.
Yeah.
Okay, boy, this is a long one, so bear with me, folks. This comes from Tom. Hi, podcast. I'm writing about an 860 square foot rectangular 3-bedroom single-story ranch house with a shallow vented crawl space under it, built in 1953 in Fenton, Michigan, climate zone 5. The 2x4 walls have blown-in cellulose and appear to be good. The ceiling is insulated with 2 thicknesses of R13 fiberglass. but there is no insulation in the crawl space, including under the floor. The current old gas furnace is counterflowing, which means that the air blows down and then the ductwork is in the basement and is distributed to the various rooms. The soil in this whole area is coarse and drains well. The house sits in a relatively low area and the water table can be near, but I hope not above the surface. There is currently no vapor barrier over the soil in the crawl space, and I think the drainage is what kept the house relatively intact for these years. We recently installed low temperature capable mini splits in the house for 2 reasons. First, the house had no air conditioning, and the cost to add AC to the existing furnace would have been only slightly less than the 2-zone mini split we put in. Number 2, the noisy furnace, along with a gas hot water heater, is located in the rear entry utility room just off the kitchen. It also houses the washer and dryer. This room shares a common wall with the only bathroom in the house. With some design work, we determined that if we remove the furnace altogether and replace the 40-gallon hot water tank with a tankless unit, we could add a much-desired half bath in that space. The same utility room houses the water meter that's fed from a pipe from the street that comes through the floor out of the crawl space. The crawl space also houses drain lines from the laundry adjacent bath, including the P-trap under the bathtub. The kitchen, before disappearing toward the sewer under the crawl space, it also houses the water lines feeding the kitchen sink. I was happily thinking while installing the mini-split system about how much more efficient the distribution would be in the heating season compared to the uninsulated ducts running through the vented crawl space. About then, all of the listening to your vapor sealing, crawl space, and heat flow discussion kicked in and made for an oh my God moment. Have we just opened the possibility for some really bad unintended consequence due to removing the heat source in the crawl space during the winter? This would have helped dry the framing, warm the water and drain lines, and warm the floor. What do we do now to keep the house both intact mechanically and comfortable with the least amount of work? This is a very inexpensive house, so a high investment solution is not going to fly.
Oh, this was the inexpensive house. Sorry. I confused the two.
You never hear anyone say, this is an expensive house, so let's spare none of it, right? He says, we plan to take up the utility room floor and demo the interior drywall to access the pipes, to install runs for the new lavatory, and to remove the old furnace ductwork. This will give us good access to the crawl space in the area where plumbing is present. The rest of the crawl space is shallow, but removing the ductwork will certainly improve that some. The ducts are now less than 8 inches off the soil level in some places. I hope to improve the sagging central beam after getting to see it better. The crawl space has a small opening in the end under the living room. All of your thoughts and rationale on how to reduce the risk of future problems will be much appreciated. Keep in mind that budget is a key consideration. I'm including some before and after floor plans to help visualize the situation. The small fan shown in the hallway soffit will be installed if we need better distribution of the conditioned air from the hallway to the rooms without mini split heads. Again, thanks for all the effort you've made to improve housing everywhere. Best regards, Tom. Well, thanks for that, Tom. Tom, you got a problem. Your pipes didn't freeze because of all the heat loss from your ductwork, right? And now you got to deal with that for sure. At least Tom realized that before winter came, right? So what's the solution, folks? Do we close up the crawl space, or do we move all the pipes into the floor system and try and move the insulation layer under the floor?
When we get questions like this, sometimes when we just had stories about this in the magazine, I wonder if they actually read the magazine. Because if you look at issue 299, Justin Fink, our old editor, did a story on crawl spaces that work, and he addressed, essentially this question. And I think what you want to do is, insulate the walls. You're going to put down a vapor barrier on the floor. You're going to insulate the walls. You're going to more or less close up that vent opening that you have. And then you're going to put a fan in it that blows out. And then you're going to, on the other end of the house, put in a couple registers that connect the inside to the crawl space so that some conditioned air makes it down in there and washes across the space and gets sucked out the other side. And it's going to be totally safe down there.
This is a 1-hour show that we're supposed to drag this out a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, does anybody else want to do anything differently?
Did you have any thoughts about this, Kiley? You kind of have what I would describe as a crawl space with heating ducts in there that's vented.
Yeah,
You didn't want to know that, did you?
No, I do know that. It's a full basement though. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. It's another matter. If Matt's got the solution and Justin wrote all about it, I'd say done and done. Why,
Done
what
and
did you,
done. What do you think,
what-
Jeff?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, the ever popular air sealing. Make sure
Of
that
Yeah.
course, right.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to insulate the foundation of the crawl space walls, and as Matt said, put the vapor barrier down. And you were referring with the fan, Matt, to the IRC regulations for conditioned crawl space. Am I right?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
So if you want greater specifics on that, that's where you want to go in the code for conditioned crawl space. You can find it in the index. I should have prepared myself with the code and verse, but I hope you all will forgive me.
Yeah, it's a certain CFM that you have to move for the volume of the space, but you can probably get away with like a bath fan just mounted to the joists that blows out the rim joist, and you'll be fine.
There's another way to do that too, am I right? Can't you have a transfer grill between the upstairs and the crawl space? Isn't that another way to do that?
Yeah,
If
well,
many...
that's what I was talking about with like having those registers. Really, I meant a transfer grill, and that's to get the air basically, to have a defined pathway for the air to get into the crawl space. Sometimes people will do this and just sort of like let the leakage through the floor take care of it, and I think that probably could be a way, but you're trying to use like the lowest CFM fan that you can get away with, something that's not going to really be sucking like crazy, so that you're not using a lot of power. So having a dedicated pathway, and one that is far enough away from that outlet that it's making its way through that crawl space, and one, warming it, and two, removing any moisture that's in there. That's what you want.
I would, one caution is you don't want to try and use outside air to dry this if you find you're having elevated humidity, because that'll only make the situation worse, because the warm outdoor air is going to have more water vapor in it than air coming from the house. So if you're running mini splits to cool the place in the summer, that's going to be where you want to get the air from, not from the outside, And I would personally want to put a humidistat down there, or a hygrometer, to measure the humidity, like one of those hobo data loggers that I think we've talked about a few times, and just keep an eye on it and make sure it's not getting to places where it's going to start growing mold on the floor system, because it's way harder to get rid of it once you have it than to not get it, I would say.
This idea of adding fans to distribute conditioned air from rooms that have the heads to other locations that don't have heads, is that effective? Does that work well? Mm-hmm.
It does for me, because I just have one, window AC unit, and it's like a 12,000 BTU, not gigantic window unit, and that's in the bedroom, and we have a, 1,300 roughly square foot house, and plus basement that's the same exact size, and we don't have a basement door. We took that off a long time ago. And I just put a fan in the bedroom doorway blowing out, and it keeps the entire house. It was into the 90s last week, I think. And the whole house was about, 72 degrees. So the fan definitely did the job.
Mm-hmm. I've always wondered
People are
about
going to be throwing rotten fruit at their smart speakers, but I can tell you, when you have window units, it demonstrates how little cooling you actually need in this part of the country, right? Matt has 12,000 BTUs. I have 10,000 BTUs. We both cool our entire, relatively small homes, admittedly, but it's about the dehumidification. And if you can get that air to circulate, I'm betting that you would have to, because the smallest central air conditioning system you can get is 1.5 tons, which would be 18,000 BTUs of cooling. And I'm sure it wouldn't make the house as comfortable as my 10, because it's not going to run long enough to adequately dehumidify.
Yeah.
And that's probably what's making your house a lot more comfortable too, Matt, is you're using, a relatively small appliance to do, a lot of latent cooling and less sensible cooling.
Yeah. Yeah, I would bet. And we have, these tiny little humidistats in every room just to keep tabs on it.
Cool.
46% currently. So
That's perfect.
That is
yeah,
perfect.
it's great.
I'm jealous. There's not a lot of humidity in the air right now, though.
No, it's
maybe where you are.
no, it's beautiful out right now.
It is. I can't
You
believe
guys, I
we're
need to
working
get a
this
win-
late
I
today.
need to
What the
get a-
heck's going on?
I know.
Dang you, Microsoft.
You've really convinced me I need to get a window unit. I have been, putting that off and putting it off because I don't
For
like my house.
$200, you're going to be miserable.
It's not the cost. The humidity just stinks, and that's the driving factor. But I just don't like having my house closed up. I have every window wide open all the time. But you pay for that when the humidity comes around. So
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
a double-edged sword. I mean,
Well, and you're showering like twice a day, right?
more like
I mean-
3 times. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
right.
like you're showering like 3
I know,
times a day,
you're
and
adding
you've got
to the house.
and
I know, so
you're creating
it's
your
just
septic problems with all these showers.
I know, probably. Yeah. I know it.
I would, I mean, just because you have an air conditioner doesn't mean you can't open the window. I mean, you don't want to open it while the air conditioner's running, but
Of course,
it doesn't
right.
prevent you from opening a window.
I know.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's like people who have air conditioning, you just shut up the house and you have false air. But I know that's not true. Of course not.
Well, it is for me
just got-
because it's much nicer than opening the windows in the summertime.
There's a way to balance it, I'm sure.
Well, I'm going to ask our listeners to help with Dyami's conundrum with regarding pigment because, yeah, we don't know.
What do you mean? I thought you gave some good answers there.
Well, we don't know that this stuff's going to stand. Well, Matt seems to think that lime wash will be. I'm curious how you're going to paint these individual rows of shingles. I think you're going to have to paint them ahead of time because it's going to be very difficult to keep the colors separate, right?
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and then you can just dip them in. You don't even
Yeah.
have to brush it on. You can just create a bucket of this stuff and just dip it in, and do it that way. A lot more fun.
We got some an interesting web link from Chris. He says, I look forward to the next episode of the Fine Homebuilding podcast being beamed directly to me via plywood satellite. And he included a link to the world's first wooden satellite set to launch. Can plywood survive in space? Did any of you check this out?
I did.
Do you
I
want to
did.
describe it, Kiley?
I don't know how. You know what I noticed? I couldn't get the sense of the scale of this thing.
I think
Did
it's
you?
10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, I think. Something
That's
like
not
that.
very
Okay.
big.
No, it's not.
It said I'm pretty sure that's what it said. Maybe.
What are they
bigger than
shooting,
that.
putting it up with a bottle rocket? What are they doing?
It's like considered a nano satellite, and it's going to be going up as, along with some other payload, I think.
Well, it's kind of cool. I
Yeah.
mean, like,
I forget what's it gonna measure? What's its purpose? I forget. I didn't read it in full.
they're going to send up a hobo data logger to check the moisture content of that plywood through seasonal cycling, I'm sure.
That's more or less what it sounded like they were going to do. Like they're going to have sensors inside the thing to
Ben
basically
Bogey
monitor
sponsored this. He shot this up. I love this show. All right. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Matt, Kiley, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. And send those links for those plywood satellites. I want to hear more about it. Thanks, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building.